The largest UBI studies that it's been done under the most controlled circumstances ever looks like it's ended up in failure. Now, I have done a much earlier video on universal basic income, and just a quick overview of what it is. There's an idea out there, and believe it or not, it actually had some initiation in libertarian circles. But the idea is instead of having a hodgepodge of all these different welfare programs, just basically have one lump stipend and get rid of all the government programs, basically just a handover of cash. And this idea has gained traction on and off over the last 20 years. More recently, a lot of people have gotten behind it. So, what I'll do is give you my view of UBIs, what works and what doesn't, and then we'll get into this study itself. And the study that we're talking about here, I do have a link in the comments. You want to go look at the study yourself. First, typically UBI or Universal Basic Income fail because there isn't a known expiration date. If the program's open ended, people adjust their lifestyles to the new amount of income. And essentially, this study backs that up to a certain extent. But when people have an expiration date, more people are likely to respond to it. And even though this particular study did have an expiration date, I actually have an explanation for why I think it still failed while having an expiration date. I still stand by the idea that expiration date improves the likelihood of working. When you essentially do something along the lines of universal scale, essentially it fails due to demand increase with no production increase. Saw this in England in the 1800s when their mass universal plan essentially didn't improve anybody's standard of living and actually decreased it. Large region programs are harder to measure. Alaska is a good example of this. First, essentially their money is coming in from an outside source. Whereas in virtually all UBI schemes, you're tapping your own resources to get at the money, i.e., the taxpayers are paying for their own universal income. Whereas in this case, it's essentially oil revenue that the taxpayers would have never seen in the first place. And the other problem of measuring it is you don't have any control groups. If everybody in a state is getting the money, how do you gauge whether their lives have improved, especially when it's been going on long term? Uh, where we seem to see the best results in the studies that have shown good results is it's when it's in a limited geographical area. It has fixed end times and everybody gets it. These tend to have good results. So let's talk a little bit about this study. The study was conducted by the National Bureau of Economic Research, but other than what money came out of their hide for running their, basically paying for their researchers, etc., the most of the UBI, the actual payments to people, uh, came out of money that came from 501(c) organizations that are were really interested in seeing how this would work. So the gist of it is 1,000 low-income individuals were randomized into receiving $1,000 per month unconditionally for 3 years. And then a control group of 2,000 participants receiving $50 a month was run alongside of it. Just understand what the logic is on that is you want to compare roughly like groups. So the group receiving $50 a month, the control group, $50 a month isn't really enough to change their life and their behaviors very much, but it is enough to get them to fill out your surveys and answer questions. Then you have a roughly good comparison to this group. So then your test group basically you get to compare the test group to the control group, and essentially 2,000 participants in the control group. So by comparing these two groups, essentially what ended up happening was by adding $1,000 per month, their original income fell by an average about $1,500 per year, generally meaning they chose to work less. The effects of this fallen income actually increased over the course of the study. So rather than people starting to react to the end of the study coming to a close, they were actually working less or trying to take advantage of what slack time they could get out of the program before it ended. The program resulted in a 2 percentage point decrease in labor market participation for the participants. That was roughly 1.3 to 1.4 hours per week reduction in labor hours. The generated the largest increase in time generated from this time savings from working was spent on leisure. Quoting paper, we find no impact on quality of employment, and our confidence intervals can rule out even small improvements. So, one of the things the UBI people believed would happen is that if you gave people this money, they would use it as an opportunity to move into a better quality of life job, either by doing some kind of improvement to themselves or basically taking time out of their other job to find a better job. This didn't happen. There was no significant effects on investments in human capital, meaning that nobody, or at least it is very insignificant, people using the opportunity to get a better education, get certification, get training. That didn't seem to happen at all. The participants primarily use the time gained through working less to increase leisure, also increasing time spent on driving or other transportation and finances. So the effects of all of this are very modest in magnitude in terms of the study. Quoting again, we can reject even small changes in several other specific categories of time use that could be important for gauging the policy effects of unearned cash transfer, such as time spent on childcare, exercising, searching for a job, or time spent on self improvement. So, the point of this is essentially what time these people created from getting the money in. They didn't even do anything like exercising or anything else like that, looking for a new job or anything. They just basically spent more downtime. Okay. Also from the paper itself, asking extremely detailed questions about workplace amenities, we find no substantive changes in any dimension of quality of employment and can rule out even small improvements. Mind you, just to remind you, paper was written by people who really wanted to see this work. The treatment group also self reported increased rates of disabilities that limited the work they could do. We saw no significant reductions in barriers to employment. Um, Basically, this program was run in two different locations simultaneously. See if region had an impact on it. It didn't. One was run in North Texas, the other one was run in Central Illinois. Uh, they gathered recipients. Part of it came through a advertisement app with Snap. Don't know. I didn't know. Don't know how that works, so have to take their word for it. Social media and mailers. The bulk of it came from people getting mail. I believe they sent up to four inquiries to people trying to get them to join the program via mail. There were three considerations that they had in mind for the program. First was that the study sample included a minimum of 20% non Hispanic whites, 20% Black, and 20% Hispanic participants. Second is that it included a minimum of 30% of people in the 30 to 100% federal poverty level, which is around $26,000 per year, and uh, a minimum of 30% between 100% to 200% of the federal poverty level, and no more than 25% between the 200% and 300% of the poverty level. And it says in terms of gender representation, it was reflected that the distribution of men and women were roughly equal, but with a small skew towards women. Now, um, I see issues in the way they did things here that actually was probably self defeating. Um, I actually, even though I would expect bad results with this, I would expect better results than the ones they got. Uh, Now, in almost every system, we see something called uh, Pareto curve, basically the 20/80 curve. Uh, and generally, if you have a roughly um, properly randomized group, you'd expect 20% of the people to extremely outperform the remaining 80%. Uh, so the fact that there is no evidence of a 20/80 curve here, I'm thinking that their selection process actually defeated their actual test. Okay, the first bias, in my opinion, is self-selection error. The method of recruitment versus the mentality of success. Uh, okay, think of it this way: what, how many people respond to mail from places that they don't know? I get still a handful of bills in the mail. I get a few other things in the mail, and I recognize mail that I get as what's the important stuff just by looking at the envelope. Every once in a while, they'll sneak something past me that's an advertisement or an offer from like a financial institution I actually use, but typically I know how to sort out the important stuff quick. There's other things I can figure out how to throw away immediately. Some I have to open and glance at for a second and throw it away. I would think under this circumstance, I would probably have thrown this away maybe four times in a row unless I heard about it through some other means. So I believe, kind of similar to way polling works or fails to work, is when you call somebody on a landline, you are selecting the type of group you're going to get answers from. So I think by depending on mail, I think they basically self selected the type of people who are more likely to uh, do capital improvements with the money coming in. Uh, i.e., people who would say, "Oh, boy, I got this debt and I know it's a really bad thing, and so I'm going to use these 36 months, i.e., 36,000 extra dollars I'm going to get over the next 3 years to knock out this debt," or I'm going to use this $36,000 to buy a more reliable car so that I can get to my job. I'm going to use this $36,000 to go get a certificate or training or some kind of educational program that'll bump me up in income. Or I'm going to use this $36,000 to start a small business that I've been planning on doing. And we don't see any of that there. So the fact that this didn't budge the needle at all tells me that you're not looking, they did not pick a normal population. They picked a population at one end of the spectrum, so to speak. I think they also did a poverty bias. Essentially, people who are at the poverty level or below are roughly 10% of the population. However, with their criteria, they actually double the sampling against this group. Uh, they almost have the representation of the lower middle class. So when you're looking at the lowest 10% of income, you're probably looking at people that either have physical, mental, or behavioral issues that preclude their ability for money to solve their problems. If you had a wider sampling rate, you probably pick up that 20% who go, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If I can discipline myself and plan ahead a little bit, I can improve my lot. However, this lower 10% uh, don't have, and it could be physical disability, mental disability, or they may just not have behaviors that allows them to plan ahead to use $36,000 to their advantage. So I think they skewed the 20% of the potential success rate out of their entire test. Um, or that this is somehow one of those situations where the 2080 rule doesn't apply. And as I stated before, I do think there are situations where UBI could work. But I still am in general against UBI because, okay, so in my opinions, if you took the ultimate situation where you could make the greatest amount of improvement, I would, let's say, target the 10 most economically depressed counties in the United States. And everybody in that county would get a UBI payment. And there would be a deadline saying, yep, 2, 3 years from now, this is over, it's done. I would fully expect that 20% of the population of each of those counties would end their UBI in a better position than what they started. And likelihood is those people would probably make things better for everybody else around them as well, because they would probably either be bringing income in or creating jobs or just somehow making the county a better place. Uh, and I actually think something like that would work. The reason I'd be against doing it, besides the fact it's coming from tax money, which I dislike. But the other thing is, there's no politician who would be able to control themselves to be able to do that, because they would get it into their heads that somehow, hey, if we just do this more, if we just apply it everywhere, it's just going to suddenly work. It's like it won't. Essentially, the history and human behavior prove it can't. So that's why I would be against even doing a program I think would be beneficial. I'm against because the politicians would F it up. All right. How many people are aware of this study? How many people are UBI fans? Does this change your opinion on UBI in any way? Tell me in the comments below. All right. Please smash the like button. If you have come here and you're not a regular subscriber to my channel, it means the YouTube algorithm helped you find me. Take a look at my other titles. I do lots of stuff. Please consider subscribing. And of course, if you know somebody who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.